So how did Dave look on Wednesday and Friday, and what do you think for Sunday for him?
Yeah, I thought he looked really good, but we'll see how he comes in tomorrow and see how he's feeling before we totally commit to that, whether or not he's playing.
Steve McGargy.
Saw Jaire was back at practice today. Any other changes on the COVID list, and what's Jaire's potential availability, if at all, for Sunday?
Yeah, there's been no new updates with the COVID list, but I would not anticipate Jaire playing. Just only having the one day this week, I don't want to put him out there.
Mark Daniels.
Hey, Matt, got me?
Got you, Mark.
Do you have are you still going to play it by ear, or do you have a more firm plan on playing time, or you just kind of see how that goes in the game?
Well, I just want to see how the flow of the game goes. I would say that, yeah, I've put a lot of thought into it, but here's the reality. This is not preseason game number 3 where you have 75 guys or 70 guys in uniform. We've got 48 players, so the guys are going to play. There could be a couple guys that come out early, but I would say the majority of our football team, when you only have 48 helmets on game day, they're going to play the majority, if not the whole game.
Rob Domofsky.
Hey, Matt, regardless of what happens in a season finale, I can't remember. I apologize if we asked you this earlier, but is there any sort of carryover in your experience to postseason or not?
Well, that's tough for me to answer. And I would say not necessarily in the situation that we're in now, because I've never been in this situation. So I've just never experienced anything like this before, where you are the number 1 seed with a game left in the regular season. So I'm sure we'll learn a lot from this.
Ryan Wood.
With that said about the limited players, surely you could get away with taking 1 or 2 guys off the field, namely an MVP quarterback. Is that why does he need to play?
I don't think he necessarily needs to play. I think he's proven that throughout the course of the season in terms of the lack of practice that he's had and still going out there playing at an MVP level. So I don't think he necessarily needs to play. I think he wants to play, and I think he wants to keep the momentum going.
Bill Huber.
Yeah, with going back to Dave and Jaire again, is it maybe different for Dave to play just because it's a physical position you maybe can't replicate that on the practice field, while Jaire, you probably could replicate that on the practice field?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of variables that weigh into the decisions, but certainly I think in David's case, here's a guy that he hasn't played in over a year. So would we love to see him out there? Absolutely. But I want to make sure, and we want to make sure that that he's in the right mindset first and foremost, but also that he can protect himself and that he's fully functional. And he's coming off a big injury. So we just want to make sure everything's 100%, or as close as it can be to 100% before we put them out there.
Jason Wilde.
So Matt, you said earlier this week that you wanted to get those guys work if you could in this game, so they have some game experience going to the playoffs. So what does your preparation for them look like then moving forward into next week and in 2 weeks to get them to where you want them to be?
Well, I think that's something that we'll monitor on a daily basis and adjust as we go. But I would say in an ideal setting, those guys would be full participants in practice without any limitations. And, one thing that we've got to make sure with all these guys on our team is making sure that we get the conditioning in and as well as just keeping their mind sharp on ball.
Tom Silverstein.
Matt, is there any chance when you get to Sunday you decide you don't want to play Rodgers, that you just don't think it's worth it? And have you thought that through? I mean, to what extent have you thought it through in terms of the risk?
Yeah, I mean, that's all we've been kind of thinking about and talking about, Tom, is just, making sure that we protect him to the best of our ability and, call plays hopefully that don't put him in jeopardy. Obviously, there's risk every time you step out on that field, whether it's a game field or whether it's a practice field, and everything you do. So we just want to make sure we're smart, but I can't think of anything that would take him off of the field right now unless he came to me with some concerns.
Matt Schneidman.
Matt, Aaron had mentioned Sunday that Randall might have a chance to play. Is that the case, or do you think he still needs the bye week to get back to playing shape?
I thought Randall looked really good, but I think just with the circumstances right now, I just talked to him. I think it's in everybody's best interest to give him 2 more weeks to amp that up and let him go in the playoffs.
Brian Wood.
Curious how Josh Myers is doing, chances he might play. But with the way that Lucas Patrick has played center for you, is Josh guaranteed that starting spot when he returns? That's the spot he was drafted to play. But is that his spot when he returns to full health, or is Lucas Patrick going to retain that?
I think that's something that we'll work through, but I think Josh has done an outstanding job. He's looked really good at practice. I would anticipate him playing in this game. And then we'll kind of just there. First of all, there's nothing guaranteed. No job. I should say that. I say that kind of loosely. The majority of jobs aren't necessarily guaranteed. But we're always, you guys know, we're always trying to put the best combination of guys out there, especially when you're talking the offensive line. I think Lucas has done more than we could ever imagine. I think he's playing at a really high level. So that is definitely within the conversations of just trying to get the best 5 out there that give us the best chance to win.
Jason Wilde.
Matt, talking about the 48 helmets that you have on game day, Campbell was his team's obviously in a vastly different position than you guys are, but he was very clear that he did want to get a look at a bunch of young guys because of the position they're in. Is there the possibility to both, get Aaron and Devontae and those guys some work, but also take this as an opportunity to see some young guys in a game that really does count? It's not a preseason game and you've game planned, et cetera. Is there a value in that for you guys?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's value in every opportunity that these guys get to go out there and compete. So we're always evaluating every time we get in those competitive situations, whether it's practice, and there's nothing like the game reps, just to see how these guys respond, in the moment, when things aren't necessarily scripted, how they react to looks that you may or may not be totally prepared for. So absolutely, there's always value to watching guys go out there and compete.
Bill Huber.
Yeah, Matt, how weird has this week been for you? Just with all the, or maybe it's not, maybe just weird for us, but with all these, is this guy going to play? Is that guy going to play? How much do they play? That whole dynamic.
Yeah, you guys are the only one that's made it weird for us with all your questions. So.
Brian Wood.
Glad we could do that for you.
I'm just kidding. Don't be so sensitive,
offense.
guys.
No offense. We've asked you about everyone else, so I'd feel really bad if we left out Zadarius Smith from the party. Where's he at? What are your conversations like with him as far as potentially getting back? And does the nature of his position maybe lend itself to a quicker return? I mean, he barely practiced at all in training camp and was able to play 18 snaps in the opener.
Well, I wouldn't say the nature of the position. I would say more so his experience that he's had, going out there and competing at a high level. So, he's a guy that, and I know I sound like a broken record, and you guys probably think I'm full of crap, but we're hopeful. But until he gets there, I mean, I really don't have a whole lot to add on that.
Jason Wilde.
Matt, you've obviously spoken glowingly about Lazard a bunch of times, and I've never heard the word goon be more heartfelt and loving than when you say it. But he's also delivered now production in the non-goon stuff, right? Catching big passes, et cetera. And Devontae was telling us about kind of a tough meeting that the receivers had where they kind of got after the younger guys a little bit. What have you seen from Lazard since then? Apparently it was around the Rams game. And what have you seen from your receiver group as a whole, maybe in the aftermath of that?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of production from all those guys, and it seems to be at different times, throughout different games. But that is a position, obviously, where the standard is held very high. And you got Devontae to thank for that, because he kind of sets the tone for that room. And it was great to add another veteran guy like Randall Cobb, who's been there, done that, just to echo what Tay's been saying, and just, another veteran guy that is just played in a lot of meaningful games. So, but I think those guys are kind of tone setters for an offense, not only by the way they go out there and catch passes, but the way they compete, the way they, block for their teammates, all the little things that they do. And that's just one of those positions that I know I've said it to them that, hey, I know I'm tough on you guys and that we are tough on you guys, but it's because we believe in you guys. And so it's a blessing and a curse, I would say. We've got a lot of guys that can do multiple things in that room, and it's, one of our more competitive groups, I would say, on our team. It's a very complete competitive group, and those guys are just scratching and clawing for every opportunity that they can get. And when you get those opportunities, you got to make the most of them.
Bill Huber.
As a Michigan guy, Matt, is it still important or not important? Is it still meaningful to come back here to play, or is that just kind of a year one thing for you? And now it's just kind of another game for you?
Yeah, I would say, there's going to be a lot of people that I know in the stadium, but, it's just, to me, it's just another game. And now it's a very meaningful game. You're talking about an NFC North rival. So we never want to discount that, but it's not, so what I'm from there, I haven't lived in Michigan in a really long time.
Ryan Wood.
Matt, I've heard what you said all week about this game still being important, even though it doesn't mean anything in terms of playoff implications. And I guess I'm still having a hard time understanding how this is any different than a preseason game, given there is no implications on the line, unlike every other game played this season. So why is this game important when the reason that you play these games doesn't exist this week?
Well, first of all, every time you get to go out there, whether you don't think it's important, I promise you everybody around the league is evaluating these guys. So every opportunity they get to go out there, I mean, your tape is your resume in this league. And I know you guys have heard that quite often, but when people are watching that tape, whether it's in our building or outside of our building, they're evaluating each individual on how they're playing, and they don't take in necessarily the circumstances. So it is important. And I also think just from our standpoint, it's important to keep the momentum going. And every time we step out on that field, whether it is a preseason game or, in your eyes, a non-meaningful game, our guys go out there with that mentality that we want to win, and we're going to do everything in our power to win, and we're going to compete at the highest level. And I think that's just kind of the standards and expectations that we have for everybody on our football team, and our coaches included. It's not like we didn't game plan any less than we normally would. We put in the hours. We were here very late on many nights, and there's no shortcuts. And I just think that you can't take anything for granted. Every time you get to go out there, you got to show what you're made of.
Jason Wilde.
Matt, I appreciate that answer about the wide receiver room, but as is often the case when I ask my insufferably long questions, I then lose the other part that I asked about, which was Lazard specifically. You have been a big fan of his work for a long time, but what have you seen change about him specifically in the last couple of weeks with his production?
I wouldn't say there's anything specifically that we've seen change. I just think he's gotten more opportunity, and he's made the most of those opportunities. Obviously, the big catch last week, on the double move, he did a great job of going up and high pointing that ball. And it's just, again, everybody knows that the passing game primarily runs through number 17. And so, when those guys get their number called and they get those ops, they got to come through. And typically that encourages 12 to keep giving them more opportunities.
Tom Silverstein?
Hey, Matt, is there a chance David Moore would be able to play on Sunday? Are you hoping that that's still the case? And in relation to that, if not, is Amari Rogers, do you still want to continue to try to get him involved in one way or another?
Yeah, absolutely. David will not be active for this game. And so it's going to be Amari will be handling the return responsibilities. And absolutely, we'd love to give him some opportunities on the offensive side of the ball as well.